Hello, this is Lady Tehila from the Coven of the Open Mind, and you're watching Metaphysics 101. Hail and welcome. In this lecture, we tie all of the very scientifically accurate knowledge of the nature of existence into one theory of literally everything, one theory that unifies both science and religion and explains the existence of higher consciousness, or God. We're also going to explain how rectifying the oneness of the universe with the duality of the universe, the subject of the last 4 lectures, we're going to talk about how rectifying those two apparently dichotomous states and apparently opposite states of being give rise to all of the other seemingly superficial experiences that neither science nor religion can alone properly explain. If you remember back to previous lectures, all of the forces of the universe arise from one place. They come from one singularity. And at some level, once things get hot enough and fast enough, all of those forces unify into one force. If you recall from our discussion on quantum physics, spontaneous symmetry breaks caused by the existence of mass, caused by the fact that our background independent universe is not a static stage, but a dynamic one, influenced directly by the actors that move across it. Therefore, all things in the universe are one. They're one continuous energy field, interconnected and susceptible to influence if even the tiniest of quantum perturbations ripple unnoticeably throughout our physical space-time. And yet, our universe is also discrete. Breaking down into finite, countable pieces, these pieces can come into and out of existence, and the information that they contain only has to be conserved across all of space and time. The true nature of the fabric of our universe is timeless, formless, even beyond our conception of reality, our physical laws, and the logic that they perpetuate. Okay? Our universe is, as we discussed, it's like a sentence. It's defined by the meaning or the composition of the universe, the things inside of the universe, what those things look like, what those words are and what they look like, and the location of those words, the physical objects in this case, the location of them within the sentence, within space, right? So that defines the meaning of our universe, that defines this sentence. And yet the sentence is ever changing, with a meaning that shifts and changes over time as the things in the universe shift and change over time and move around. So the universe is an interaction of processes which, when viewed as a cross-section from an observer within time, someone who experiences the evolution of time as well as observing it, anyone who views the universe through the horizon of individual experience, to this person, the universe appears as physical objects, physical forces, and physical laws that govern those objects and forces that cannot be broken or changed. And this is the fine but bold line between religion, between intuitive understanding of a universe that we both observe and experience, and delusion. If you recall from past lectures, interactions of processes define matter. And these interactions are themselves defined by oscillations of energy. These oscillations of energy can, in turn, be influenced by the interactions of processes. So the evolution of time in our universe is a system both independent from influence and observation and dependent on influence and observation. Our reality is the most real because we say it is. But if a tree falls in the middle of a forest and nobody's around to hear it, it still produces sound waves. The tree still exists when you aren't looking at it. The universe is observing itself on a level far more meta and far more powerful than any need of physical macroscopic senses like your eyes or ears. And yet, those of us with macroscopic senses who experience a macroscopic world are still really limited by the physics inherent in our being, in the matter that makes us up. Just because we know that a tree exists in the forest doesn't mean we will necessarily know once it has fallen until we happen upon it once again. The nature of our physical bodies, the nature of physical matter is concealment. The higher dimensions are concealed from us by the very nature of how we exist. If the entire universe is one interconnected system, essentially one infinitely complex process playing out in a number of dimensions that transcend time and space and even reality, then there must necessarily be consciousness at every level of this system. If any level has it, they all have it, because all of these planes of existence, all of these dimensions are taking up the same space. I think, therefore I am, right, Descartes? We exist, and we are conscious, and we are 10-dimensional beings. Where are the other dimensions? Where are the higher planes of existence? They are within the same matter that makes us up. They're not some separate space beyond space. The fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensions, they all define the properties of time. Okay, they are where we find death energy. They are where we find the spirit of the collective unconscious of the dead. The underworld is really the plane of existence right above us, and also the lower Garden of Eden from Kabbalah. The seventh, eighth, and ninth dimensions define the property of existence that is reality. Okay, and these would be like the upper Garden of Eden, where you find the angels. These are where you find the gods. Okay, these are archetypes of existence itself. Okay, and once you get to that 10th dimension, once you treat all of these dimensions as a single point, then you run out of places to go conceptually. The hypothetical 11th dimension, there's nothing that you could put in there. What is left to differ between one point and the next in the 11th dimension? We have already left behind time, reality. All potential physics unite into one superimposed force. Our universe as a single point in the 10th dimension is existence, all of it. The only thing remaining is non-existence, which isn't a point of existence. It's not made of existence if it's non-existence. So in the 11th dimension, there's our universe as a point, and then there is everything that is not our universe. And that's it. There's no 12th dimension to fold through. There's no higher dimensions beyond that. The 10th and hypothetical 11th dimension that can never really be realized is all there can be. And where are all of these 10 dimensions? Concealed within the 4 dimensions that we experience in daily life. So small that we don't notice them, we don't experience the effects of them directly, but we know they're there because when you do quantum physics, when you look at the quantum realm and the physics of that realm, you start to see the forces play out physically. As we said previously, part of us is electrical, part of us is a field, and everything that has energy vibrates in a particular way. In Wicca and witchcraft, we use these vibrations, we attune to them, we find bits of matter that enhance our own vibrations in positive ways, like crystals, plants, rocks, incense, music and sounds, anything which physically exists in the 4 dimensions, we can see and sense and experience directly. And in 10 dimensions, and in a way that is timeless and formless and beyond logic and comprehension. Okay, so we can experience them physically, and we can experience them in a way that transcends the physical. Songs can make us feel things that we don't fully comprehend. They can help us understand the feelings of the people who produce them, right? They are a window into the soul, into the part of us that is timeless, the part of us that is vibrating energy itself, which can feel the tiny fluctuations of space-time. We can feel the gravitational waves generated by, for instance, the movement of our planets. In the solar system, our planets move around the sun in a complex multi-body system, moving through an ever-shifting plane of constellations. And if we pay close enough attention to where they are and when, then perhaps we can characterize their influence on us. And that's what astrology is. Astrology is thousands of years of anthropological research, sociological research into how the gravitational waves generated by massive bodies in space pulling and tugging our sun around in its place at the center of our solar system, how these influence us in day-to-day life, how these influence us and the way we interact with the world that we live on, considering that these tidal forces are ever present in our lives and in ways that we often can't directly perceive. Can we prove that these waves influence us using science? Not right now, no. We can't measure the gravitational waves from our own solar system at all because of how small they are. But we know that they must exist from the physics. And we know that they probably should influence us since we are made of the fabric of space-time. We are made of existence, right? Because we exist, so we must be. And they are oscillations of space-time. They are oscillations of existence itself, as we discussed in the previous 2 videos. So why wouldn't they influence us? And that's the scientific basis for astrology. And note that this means, it's important to look at where all of the planets are, not just the sun and moon, all of them at the same time. Pop astrology wants to reduce people down into 1 to 2 signs, and it's honestly just not really based in science. It's more of a way that people, they can characterize what they are feeling in a way that isn't objective or reproducible. It's just like them feeling another person's energy and then interpreting it through the language of astronomy or astrology, and that way of doing it is prone to bias and error. And if you're interested in hearing more about the science of astrology or learning astrology, we actually have a 101 course on our YouTube channel that you can check out after this episode. So note that here we have justified the ability of a person to perceive psychically of information that is beyond their personal horizon. So if you remember, we talked a lot about horizons and how information can be beyond what you're able to perceive. That's true for individual people. Like no one observer within the universe, as we discussed last lecture, is able to be aware of all of the information that every observer collectively gathers. If the aspects of the universe that are timeless and formless are everywhere, within everything, concealed from us, but ready to start influencing us in bizarre, higher dimensional ways, the minute our particles decay into basic parts, there's a sense of transcendence then that unites us all, right? From stardust we came, and to stardust we shall return, right? On our plane of existence, which in Kabbalah is called Asiya, the first 4 dimensions. Asiya means action, and that's apt, right? On this plane of existence here, everything is a process. We are all one interconnected, complex process that changes and shapes space-time itself in addition to experiencing space-time and being shaped by the changing nature of space-time. Nothing can exist on our plane of existence. Nothing can physically exist that does not physically act. Anything that physically exists is a process over time. That's what it means to physically exist. So the higher planes of existence in Kabbalah, Yetzirah and Beriah, absolute above that, where did these planes exist? The lower and upper Garden of Eden, heaven itself. Where does this exist? They exist right here, within and around us. They are us. Only once the illusion of physical existence falls away and time falls away. They say in Judaism that God is beyond infinite. And that's true, right? The all-conscious would be what? Okay, he would be the consciousness of the universe, of existence itself. He would be within and around us, formed from the same material that forms consciousness. Conservation of information across the entire universe, right? Conservation of information, something we talked about that's very important in physics. And that states that across the entire universe, across every possible timeline based on our set of physical laws, and across every potential set of physical laws, across every marble with every shape, string imaginable, if you remember from our discussion on string theory, every way in which these vibrating bits of energy can possibly form into physical shapes and interact in physical processes, all that exists as one superimposed beyond infinite point. That is God. That is existence itself. In Hebrew, the name for God is to be. conjugated in 3 different tenses at the same time: was, is, and will be, all at once. It's because God is, period. To put anything after that sentence is to start to qualify God in ways that don't make sense. Even trying to make sense of God depends on logical rules that only exist because we are here to observe our reality. Therefore, there is no single conception of God that is correct. All that can be said is that there is higher consciousness and that every plane of existence takes up the same space. And so even an atheistic view, okay, sure, maybe the universe has some form of consciousness, right? Sure, maybe they'll acknowledge the logical consequences of these higher forms of physics. Someone will sit here and be like, okay, this person did an actual good job of explaining the physics and telling people where the physics stops and where the metascience begins. Okay, that's nice. That's responsible. They could sit here and listen to all of this, and they can agree with everything I have said and all of the science and still walk away and say, okay, but I don't believe that you can have a relationship with this higher consciousness. I think that it's probably beyond comprehension, and that any person that thinks they understand it definitely doesn't. Okay, atheism, perfectly valid, doesn't violate any physical laws. That is their belief. Maybe we all just gain the knowledge and wisdom of working with divinity from within ourselves as we try to relate to something that is, by its very definition, beyond relation. Sure, maybe that is how it works. Atheism, Judaism, Christianity, Wicca, Taoism, Hinduism, every religion in the history of our world and in the future of our world, all of them are basically just intuitive ways to understand the fundamental nature of our complex universe to make sense of the nonsensical. And when these religions are taken in the proper context as questions, hear the phrasing from the previous lecture, religions, they provide specific answers that grant meaning and purpose to an otherwise purposeless existence. And it becomes clear when you look at religion this way that it is, in fact, extremely valuable, and that no belief is really invalid unless it violates the laws of physics. Okay? The laws of physics dictate how we can behave in the physical realm. A belief in heaven that says people stop physically existing and live in harmony with God, i.e., people reach nirvana, i.e., people attain enlightenment, i.e., people are freed of their reincarnation cycle, i.e., people become one with all that is. However it is defined, however you say it, okay? All of these interpretations are valid because they're all just different interpretations of the same thing. If a conscious being achieves awareness of God in all things and sees through the illusion, then when they die, do they really stop existing? What is the soul, if not the part of us that always has existed and always will? In reality, we are one soul, one being, experiencing ourself in an infinite number of ways, over and over and over again, with an awareness that cannot be characterized by the passage of time. God is us, and yet beyond us. Delusion comes not from seeking to relate to these foundational truths in an intuitive, personal way, not from just being religious. Okay, religion itself may involve forced delusion at times. Delusion is not some big scary thing. If it's controlled, it can be very useful. The placebo effect really is a form of delusion, and it's very powerful. Delusion comes not from seeking to relate to these foundational truths. It comes not from seeking to have religious beliefs. It comes when someone decides that their personal characterization and their personal relationship with these truths are those comprise the only path to enlightenment, the only path to freedom from the illusion of physical life. In many ways, physical life demands suffering. In order to live, we either sacrifice nature, animals, and plants, we kill those around us, or we ourselves are killed. In other words, in order to physically exist, we must be selfish. We live in sin. We must give thanks for the aspect of existence that is sacrifice, or else we couldn't exist. Hence ritual sacrifices of animals, the idea of Easter and Christ's sacrifice for us. The God dies so that we can survive. In Wicca, we believe the same thing. Every fall, Lu, or whatever incarnation of the God you believe in, dies. He's in the crop. He dies. We sacrifice him. We cook him into bread. We eat him. We give thanks to the God for the idea of sacrifice, because without sacrifice, none of us could live. It's all the same archetypes. Some play out through nature. Some play out through a larger battle of forces. Some are broken into dichotomies of good versus evil, or suffering versus peace, and none of the details matter. No one spiritual path can be said to be any more correct than any other, including atheism. Sorry, folks. The truth is the truth. There are dimensions that transcend time and space. There is life, in a sense, on every plane of existence. There is consciousness that transcends our own, and whether or not you believe you can relate to it and how you relate to it is entirely up to you to decide. No one can say, God wants this, God is like that, and be stating objective facts. The objective truth is that God is, period. God is. He is existence itself, and everything that physically exists, even the conceptual non-existence that lies between each vibrating string, the empty space, the void that is non-existence, from which all vibrations come and to which all will return. The void, non-existence, and absence of order, okay? A space in which entropy is maximized, where disorder and randomness are at its highest concentration. This void, okay, that is the singularity that bore forth our universe. It is the void at the center of every black hole. It is the space in between the vibrations, the troughs between the crests of the energy that define existence itself. That is hell. That void would be hell, and that's where the demons would come from. Archetypes of that disorder are what we call demons, the opposite of the deity coin. And going to hell, okay, would mean having your soul ripped into pieces, into non-existence. It would be painful if the soul could feel pain, and it would be eternal in the sense that it happens outside of time. If you stop existing in any life, you stop existing in every life. You are forgotten, your existence pushed out of mind and out of collective memory, your influence reduced to the demons who animate your form or carry on the legacy of your destruction, and that's it. Witches, Christians, we all have the same depiction of hell, the same idea of demons. It's simply the bar for judgment which changes. If someone believes that living in sin, that whatever homosexuality or polyamory or premarital sex or abortions or whatever they believe, if they believe those things will erode their soul and invite in chaos, then they will do that. That's the truth. We have the ability to shape the nature of our existence. That's what the science tells us. We, as physical beings who observe and experience time, get to decide the meaning of time. Stuff happens outside of our control, but only as a result of someone else's control. Everything that happens is just a big interconnected process that we all influence. And just because something is theoretically possible doesn't mean it will happen, right? Remember the conversation about statistical mechanics? Just because it could take 1 billion years for particles to decay doesn't mean they will. They will always decay at a certain, half of them will always have decayed by a certain time, because there are statistics in play, and statistics can give us truth, in ways that it can give us practical truth, right? Not theoretical truth. What happens in practice. And the universe is the way it is. We can't influence the nature of our 10-dimensional existence, but we can shape how that 10-dimensional object morphs and shapes over time. In 10 dimensions, all of us are one universe, and we can shape the direction that universe takes. We can look at the pattern on the tapestry that's being woven around us, the tapestry that's woven by these higher forces that we can't directly control or even understand, and we can take whatever picture appears on that tapestry and give it meaning and purpose, even if it doesn't resemble meaning and purpose on its own. Change in our universe cannot, therefore, come as some almighty hand of God smiting everything left and right. God doesn't have will to make the world a better place. Why is the world not a utopia if there is a God? Because that's not what God wanted. That's not the purpose of existence. The purpose of existence isn't to create a perfect place where people are perfect. Existence is perfect in its imperfection. Everything that exists now, including suffering, has a reason. We know that to be true. It's a logical consequence. Everything that exists causes everything that will exist. Remember the light cones. And everything was caused by everything that did exist. The universe is one giant 10-dimensional light cone. The only reason why some things exist without purpose is because no one has decided to give those things purpose or realized the effects of those happenings down the line. Changes within the universe come down through the concealment, with tiny quantum perturbations causing randomness, as we discussed previously, influencing conscious observers in subtle ways so that we make changes and act in certain ways. And then that will set into effect more changes, and that is how the will of God manifests into our reality, through our actions and the physics that govern those actions. Changes within the universe are, by definition, things which happen over time and space and within the confines of real physical laws of reality. Therefore, the highest form of will in the universe comes from the form of consciousness, which can influence these processes directly from animal, sometimes plant life, any animated form of life. Beings on higher planes of existence, they're timeless. They're above our plane, where death energy resides. We like to think of it as being higher, being above, right? But really, they are within our plane of existence. They are the timeless aspect of our existence. The gods, they come from the plane above that. They come from the plane where reality stops existing. And anything which is our interpretation of these higher planes, ghosts, gods, demons, fae, these beings are limited in ways which we are not. Because they can't make decisions, because they can't think, because they cannot function over time like we can. And thoughts and actions, these are all things that happen over time. Will, the desire for change, is something that only can exist in the absence of the timelessness that you experience in higher planes. They will only exist in this universe because of concealment. There would be no desire to make any change on a higher plane of existence if we didn't exist in the physical plane in order to have that desire, because change itself, in the absence of time and reality, it becomes a meaningless concept. So humans interact on all planes of existence, but on the higher planes, we don't interact physically. That's why our minds can misremember the past, remember things from higher states of consciousness, which are timeless or formless in nature, see what is yet to come in the future, either as a probability curve based on the directions of all relevant light cones, like what are all the choices that could happen, or as visions of individual events which may or may not happen, and we often forget that we had those visions, especially when they come in our dreams, and then we experience déjà vu. Our minds can even mess up reality and pull in things from other universes where physics is physically different, and make those ideas real here, even if they're still impossible, like how we discussed with zombies, how we discussed the power of the imagination. And in the last video, we mentioned how quantum fluctuations are so tiny that they're basically negligible in a vacuum in space until you put an accelerating mass through it, how the void of space appears empty until some physical thing moves through it, And the physics is the same in some sense in every realm, on every level of physics. Just like how in general relativity, technically, those forces still exist on the surface of the Earth. The corrective factor is still technically needed, but the influence of it is so negligible that the approximation, the Newtonian equations, are accurate even without the corrective factors. And that's true for quantum fluctuations that occur across any system of energy, even systems that contain massive macroscopic bodies like planets and trees and people. So this is important because an accelerating mass through a vacuum is essentially giving energy to a region of space that has a lot of tiny chaos and a lot of tiny fluctuations. And that's what allows those fluctuations in the quantum fields to manifest in physically measurable ways. That's exactly how humans and conscious observers, beings who physically exist and are able to use their will to exert force over time within the universe, these beings are able to give higher planar beings some form of energy, some form of our physical energy, some investment, and then we can start to measure the existence of these higher planar beings physically. Ghosts can be measured as heat or cold, temperature changes, sometimes as electromagnetic radiation, which can be measured and heard as spoken words, the electronic voice phenomenon, EVP. And this isn't because death energy has a form of its own. Okay, death energy is the plane above this one, the physical, timeless, the side of physical existence that is timeless. And it doesn't technically have a will of its own because will is a process. A desire is a process, a thought which predicates a change over time. Timeless beings don't experience this. They don't experience will like we do. What this means is that ghosts don't need help passing over, but sometimes we need to understand what happened to them to feel at peace with the memory of them existing in our space. Gods don't need us to serve them, but we need to feel of service to them in order to feel at peace with the idea that an infinitely complex process dictates our every experience and can snuff us out or snuff out the people we care about in an instant with no warning or apparent reason. We need to feel of service. We need to feel called by these archetypes, characterizations, or quantizations of this force that is order, of the pattern that weaves throughout space-time. And we want to feel of service and feel plugged into that force so that we can feel like we have some kind of influence or control over our fate. And in turn, the belief that we have this control grants us control. Not complete control, but some amount of influence. And this is the same physics that we discussed in episode 8. This is quantum gravity, but it's being applied over a classical environment and not purely the astral realm in which this physics plays out the most obviously in a way that we can directly observe it. Science is not prepared to observe this phenomenon right now. Our ability to measure fluctuations in the fabric of space-time itself, perturbations that are this tiny and which occur so quickly in between the larger oscillations of energy, those that are the forces and the particles that make up our physical world, we can't measure it. So what do we take away from all of this? All religions are really fundamentally the same. They are all intuitive interpretations of a world that is beyond sense and reason. All beliefs are valid as long as they perpetuate our understanding of science instead of condemning it. A person cannot fly just because they believe they can, but they can know what it feels like to fly, and they can derive meaning and wisdom from an experience like that, which they themselves can never physically have. And that on its own is more powerful than the idea of flight. The idea that any conscious being, any consciousness is all consciousness. That is the most powerful conclusion of all. We are a universe experiencing itself. We are each other. We are one. And yet, we are distinct with experiences, details, minutia from our everyday lives that we might never know about each other, that might never be compatible, opinions that might condemn each other. And no one person will ever be unanimously liked by everyone, even though we are all one. Just like how within us, we can have competing feelings towards ourselves or the people around us. You can love and hate someone. Duality, dichotomy, exists in our universe in a fundamental way that allows for us to simultaneously be one and be distinct and unique and diverse. And that diversity is important because diversity is a cornerstone of life. Diversity is necessity for evolution, adaptability, and survival. God made us in every color and with every belief, and He empowered us to live our own best lives for reasons that go far beyond any one religion. God made suffering for reasons that go beyond any one lifetime. The world is perfect how it is. It is perfect in its imperfection. It's in balance, and it's built to last 1,000,000 lives of mankind, created to support infinite species of life on infinite worlds, in infinite realities, all living to overcome suffering, living to find meaning, to add to and grow our understanding, our sentence. Religion and science are not dichotomous. We can ask questions about what the world is made of using science and receive objective, unbiased answers. What is it? That's what science tells us. However, science can never tell us what something means. So we use science to identify universal truth. And then we use religion to ask questions about what those truths mean. We can use our intuition, our emotions, our empathy, and we can transcend our individual existence and find purpose and universal acceptance and love. We can evolve as a species by understanding that the nature of the questions we ask shapes the world we share. So ask good questions and never stop asking questions, and find your relationship with the universe. Feel the vibration that is existence within you, around you, within all beings who have lived or who will live. Consider a larger picture. Let the mundane concerns of your daily life fall away, even just for a short time. Dwell upon the vastness of space and the excited, busy motion of the quantum realm. Broaden your mind to the truth that lies beyond logic. But never lose sight of where that logical line lies. And that is how you balance awareness of the nonsensical, higher planar universe with the risk of dissociating from our objective physical reality. The right path to spirituality is any which focuses first and foremost on what we collectively know, our objective reality, and then which empowers us to look beyond that horizon into what we know in our hearts, what we feel to be real, our subjective truths. Mastering our reality requires acknowledging where that boundary lies and being comfortable working on either side of it. Perhaps once we as a species realize that science and religion are really one, like all things, perhaps once we realize that using both to answer different types of questions is necessary in a theory of literally everything, then maybe the nature of humanity can evolve. Maybe the world can change. Until the nature of humanity evolves, nothing really changes in the world, just the details. Maybe one day we will understand the true nature of the universe in its true form, and we ourselves will transcend our need for physical existence and for mundane, everyday life. I hope that you enjoyed this series. As usual, please comment any questions. Join our Discord server for any discussion. You can find the link to that on openmindedpath.com. And from everyone here at the Coven of the Open Mind, blessed be.